Hi, my name is Jessie Lysa, and I'm going to be talking today about the life, the works, and the passions of Lord Byron. Lord Byron is a well-known writer in Romanticism, who's most famous for his work, Don Juan. Although Lord Byron is known to be as a romantic, his writings are more autobiographical compared to the other writers in that genre. Lord Byron's work was a mix of humor, philosophy, satire, and affections. For some of his work was lighthearted, while others was much darker. Lord Byron was a phenomenal letter writer, and his 20th century publication further enhanced his literary reputation. Along with literature and poetry, Byron also wrote plays, although they aren't as renowned as his other forms of work. Some plays he provided were Manfred and Cain, whose characters showed rhetoric and replete with Byronic philosophy and self-confession. He was a deeply philosophical thinker and developed his own philosophy through his poetry. He was active in participating in debates on matters such as epistemology, which is the theory of knowledge, the agency of the individual, which is the ability to act independently and make choices that influence one's life and experiences, and the nature of reality. Author and English literature professor Emily Bernhard Jackson states that, quote, as he produces his poetry from 1812 to 1824, Byron comes to believe that stable, objective knowledge or truth does not exist. He progressively arrives at the conclusion that all so-called knowledge is in fact manufactured, subject to belief. End quote. Bernhard concludes that Byron uses poetry to argue that a skeptical reader can manufacture their own version of reality, thus changing the world. Some of the most well-known philosophers to impact Byron and his skepticism was John Locke, George Berkeley, David Hume, Thomas Reid, and William Drummond. George Gordon Byron was born January 22nd, 1788, in London, England. Byron was born with a clubbed foot, and due to no medical treatment, he was never able to get it fixed. His father was Captain John Mad Jack, and his mother was Catherine Gordon. Shortly after his birth, his father passed away in 1791. His mother took him to Aberdeen, Scotland. When Byron was 10, he moved to Newstead, England, where he inherited his great-uncle's titles and estates, thus becoming Lord Byron. Byron, in 1801, he attended Harrow, a prestigious school in London. Still struggling with his disability, which consisted of several visual abnormalities such as a short leg, a withered calf, and an inward twisting ankle, which caused him to walk on the outside of his foot instead of the sole. Byron tried to hide it and was consistently ashamed of it, and this never went away even in his adulthood. In 1803, Byron fell in love for his first time with his distant cousin, Mary Chaworth, who was already engaged and was much older than Byron was. Mary became Byron's symbol of idealization and unattainable love, which he expressed in his poems The Dream from 1816 and Hills of Annesley in 1807. Shortly after his devastation at not being able to attain Mary, he met Augusta Byron, who was his half-sister on his father's side. In 1805, Lord Byron attended Trinity College in Cambridge, where he not only acquired a large amount of debts, but he also began to show signs of his incipient sexual ambivalence. As we have previously seen, Byron has had his attachments with women, but he was also showing sexual interest in men. His first male partner that is known was John Edelston, where they became close friends and eventually began their affairs. Byron describes his relationship with Edelston as violent, though full of love and passion. In 1806, Lord Byron anonymously had his first volume of verse, Fugitive Pieces, printed. That same year, he met John Cam Hobhouse, who would become his lifelong friend and introduced him to liberal Whiggism. In 1807, Byron had his first volume of poetry published, Hours of Idleness. The Edinburgh Review harshly criticized this work, and Byron responded in 1809 with a satire piece called English Bards and Scottish Reviewers. In 1809, Byron and Hobhouse began touring Greece, where Byron began working on Childe Harold's Pilgrimage, and continued to work on it in Athens. He wrote the first two of the four cantos during this tour, and it's an autobiographical poem that describes his travels and adventures through Spain, Portugal, Albania, and the Ionian Islands. These cantos end with a lament on the occupation of Greece by the Ottoman Turks. The main characters and hero in the poem, Childe Harold, was a personification of Byron himself. His travels in Greece made a huge impact on Lord Byron. He saw their open and free frankness as a complete and refreshing opposite of the English hypocrisy and reservedness, and it broadened Byron's views. On May 3rd, 1810, Byron did what some thought would be impossible. He swam across the Hellespont, which is the stretch of water between Europe and Asia. Not only was the swim an important moment in the history of open water swimming, but Byron accomplished it even with his disability. Byron was extremely proud of what he was able to overcome and accomplish. He made his way back to London in 1811, and in 1812 made his first speech in the House of Lords, who were the upper chamber of the Parliament. In his speech, Byron defended the Luddites, a group of English workers who protested the Industrial Revolution, and spoke against the Frame-Breaking Act of 1812, which applied the death penalty to machine breaking. This speech aligned him with the Whig Party. That same year, his work, Childe Harold's Pilgrimage, was published and became one of the most popular works during the time, and he lionized in Whig society. He met Lady Caroline Lamb, where they began a hot and heavy affair, and planned to elope, but Hobhouse stepped in and stopped that from happening. Shortly after, he met Lady Oxford, who became Byron's new lover, and encouraged his radicalism. In the summer of 1813, Byron began an affair with Augusta, his half-sister, despite her already being married. His multiple ongoing love affairs began to take their toll, and Byron was overcome with guilt. Because of these affairs, he began writing tales such as The Giaour in 1813, The Bride of Abydos, 1813, The Corsair, 1814, and Lara, 1814. Byron was ready to end his affairs, and to do so, he proposed to Anna Isabella Milbank, in September of 1814. They married in January 1815, and that December she birthed his first daughter, Augusta Ada. Rumors began to spread shortly after Augusta's birth about Byron's bisexuality. So Anna Isabella left with their daughter to live with her parents in January 1816. They legally separated in April, traveling abroad and never returning to England. Byron settled in Geneva and wrote his third cantos of Childe Harold's Pilgrimage. He visited Bernese Oberland, which inspired the scenery of his poetic drama Manfred in 1817. Percy Shelley and his wife Mary Shelley were close friends of Byron's, and living with them was Mary's stepsister Claire Clairmont. In the middle of his separation with his wife, before he left England, he had impregnated Clairmont unknowingly. When Byron left to Geneva, the Shelleys and Clairmont came to stay with him, but Byron shut Clairmont down by saying he did not want to share his life with her. She birthed his second daughter, Allegra, in January 1817. Byron left with Hobhouse to Italy, where he carried on yet another affair, this time with Mariana Sagatti, who was his landlord's wife. In May, Byron traveled to Rome, where he wrote his fourth cantos of Childe Harold's Pilgrimage, and wrote Beppo, which is a poem in ottava rima, which is a rhyming stanza form of Italian origin. And Beppo satirically contrasted Italians with English mannerisms. Thanks to Beppo, Byron began working on his most famous piece, Don Juan, where he began writing the first two cantos in 1818, but they were not finished until the mid-1819. Don Juan is a fictional character who is known to be charismatic, arrogant, and for his sexual conquests, and he is also known for his downfall. Don Juan was never finished. Only 16 cantos were written, and Byron died while writing the 17th one. Byron sold his estate in Newstead and was able to pay off his debts from college, and was left with a fairly large income. In 1818, visitors of Byron said he had grown fat and looked much older than his actual age. He met Countess Teresa Gamba Guiccioli, who reignited Byron's energy and changed his life. Teresa was only 19 at the time, and she was already married to someone that was 30 times her age. Teresa returned to Ravenna, and Byron followed her, acting as her cavaliere servente, which is a man acting as an escort or a lover to a married woman. Upon meeting her family, he won their favor, and they initiated him into the secret society of Carbonari, which was a secret society that advocated liberalism and patriotic ideas. While in Ravenna, Byron wrote the Prophecy of Dante, Cantos 3, 4, and 5 of Don Juan, the poetic drama Marino Faliero, Sardanapalus, the Two Foscari, and Cain, and he wrote a satire on the poet Robert Southey called The Visions of Judgment. In 1821, Teresa and the counts were expelled from Ravenna for participating in an uprising. They, along with Byron, headed to Pisa. Byron was left behind with a foster family. Byron was out on his adventures, he ended up passing away of illness that April. In September 1822, Byron, Teresa, and the family moved to Genoa. Byron befriended a journalist named Leah Hunt, who worked for the Liberal and housed her for a time. He gave her brother, who was a publisher, all his late works, including Don Juan 6 through 16. In April 1823, Byron became an agent for the London Committee, which had been formed to aid the Greeks in their struggle with independence. In July, Byron headed to Cephalonia, where he sent £4,000 of his own personal money to help prepare the Greek fleet for the sea services. He then sailed for Missolonghi and joined Prince Alexandros Mavrocordatos, sorry, I jacked that one up, who was the leader of forces in western Greece. Byron tried to unite the many Greek factions and took command of a brigade, the Suliote soldiers, who are known to be the bravest of the Greeks. But in February 1824, Byron fell ill. He passed away April 19th. Lord Byron became a symbol of disinterested patriotism and a Greek national hero. His body was brought back to England and was buried in his family vault near Newstead. 145 years after his death, a memorial was built and placed on the floor of Westminster Abbey, where he was previously rejected from being buried. Some may not know this, but Lord Byron played and had much influence on vampires in literature. Vampire myths were common to Eastern and Southern Europe in the 1700s, and they made their way into British literature closer to the 19th century. The vampire craze and Gothic romanticism in England were partly inspired by Godfrey Burge's poem Lenore. Lord Byron was an essential piece to the development of British vampire literature. In 1813, Byron published his epic poem Giaour, and although the poem is not about vampires, it does have some of the earliest passages about them in English literature. The poem's narrator predicts that the Giaour will be punished for a murder he committed by becoming a vampire after his death, condemning to suck the blood of his daughter, sister, and his wife. But first on earth, as vampire sent, thy corse shall from its tomb be rent, then ghastly haunt thy native place, and suck the blood of all thy race. There, from thy daughter, sister, wife, at midnight drain the stream of life. Yet lo, the banquet which perforce must feed thy livid living corse. Thy victim ere they yet expire, shall know the demon for their sire. As cursing thee, thou cursing them, thy flowers are withered on the stem. Byron influenced his friend John Polidori to write his first English vampire fiction, The Vampire, which is a short work partially based on Byron himself. This work came from an infamous night in 1816, when a group of young writers found themselves stuck inside reading supernatural tales. One of them proposed they should write a ghost story, and this prompted Mary Shelley to write Frankenstein, and for Byron to start but never finish a fragment, which was about vampires. John Polidori used Byron's unfinished story for the base of The Vampire, and when it was published twice in 1819, both publishers wrongfully gave authorship to Lord Byron. As to Lord Byron, we want to have works such as Frankenstein or The Vampire. Um, he influenced them greatly into writing those. He also has influenced many other people and has been influenced. He plays a great role in our classic literature, and not only is he an amazing poet and author, but he also had a very interesting and busy life. Thank you guys so much for taking the time to watch my presentation, and I hope you all have a wonderful rest of the semester. Thank you.